Welcome to OverBoost, a podcast interview series featuring discussions with speedrunners about their interest in all things gaming and speedrunning. I am your host, pmcTRILOGY, and with me today is KZ FREW. How are you, Mr. FREW?
Hello. I've had a nice Saturday. I hope you're well.
Thank you. So, first off, I always like to touch in on current events with the people I'm interviewing. And recently, there's 2020, but also on your stream, you have been really grinding for a time in the 50-minute range for the prime, I would say the prime Vice City any percent category, that is any percent no SSU. How's that going, and how do you feel about it? How do you feel about grinding for a goal time like that?
You know, it's really fine. I think everybody kind of approaches these differently. And really, I see the process kind of just as a whole thing. Whether it's, I wake up and do a bunch of resets. That's the process. You wake up the next day, you get the best pace ever, and then you just kind of psych yourself out of it. That's the process. I think it's been really engaging. The people are into it because it's kind of been a meme. The 50, right? It's very good. It's very good stream lore. So I've been digging it. I'm excited to achieve that time because I think it's going to be probably one of the most exciting speedrun achievements I've had in a while, where it's just kind of like, sometimes I get a PB and I'm like, all right, cool. There we go. And then maybe I don't pursue it further. But I think the real gold, the real diamonds, is when you really work for something and see the results and see the very tangible 5-0 and whatever two digits follow, hopefully as low as possible. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's been great.
Sure, yeah, and just to give people an idea of the scope of this, Vice City, of course, is a very popular video game and a very popular speed game. I went and checked on speedrun.com. I think there's just a few more than 300 different runners have submitted times for any percent no SSU, and having a 50-minute or less time puts you, I think, firmly in like the top 7 or 8 runners, right?
Yes, there's 249s. And then 5 people, maybe 4, with 50. It's soon to be more. Shane is going for 50. Shane XD. I'm going for 50. And as time goes on, I think people are finally starting to get good at this game. It's taken a long time, but it's really starting to look like we're pushing the boundaries here and getting really optimized times.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll get a bit into that later. The OverBoost format is typically, we're going to start a little bit with your personal history, and then we'll dive, I think, into, right now our plan is to dive into Vice City, both no SSU as well as all missions, and then also talk a little bit about the sensation that was Miami Vice 2K4.
Good. Good. Very good.
But first, I want you to set the foundation for us. I want you, where does gaming start for you? Was it a particular friend, family members? Where does that come into your life?
Going back to gaming, disappointedly, perhaps the first game I played is not something I can verify for you. I was too young, I don't remember. But my parents had an NES, and I believe they let me play a little bit of Super Mario Brothers. So maybe that's the first game, right? But I have memories that I strongly associate with foundations of my gaming besides that moment, which apparently was hard for my parents to tear me away. My dad kind of created a monster in me in this regard. He would mention a lot about, I'm going to get you a PlayStation. Son, I'm going to get you a PlayStation. And he would hype that up. And I didn't know what a PlayStation was. I did not. The toys I had played with at the time, the way I'd occupied myself as a child up to that point, the standard things, Lego sets, car sets, riding the bike, riding the scooter. I had a Razor scooter.
A Razor scooter?
Yeah, I had a Razor scooter. I had the Razor scooter game as well. But that was a bit later. Anyway, then he gets a PlayStation and it's video games, and I was astounded. I also have good memories of going over to the neighbor's house, They had it in 64. They had Super Mario 64. That was a very fun game, very very enjoyable. Always looked forward to going over there to the neighbor's house. But yeah, and then I just kind of drifted into, the sixth generation. Is it PS2? Was primarily my console, and Grand Theft Auto was a big title on that console. And I learned about Grand Theft Auto Vice City, perhaps one of the most impactful games for me, from the elementary school playground, as you do.
A fine place.
Best place to learn about, M-rated video games, about the crime world. So yeah, telling me about...
No, I hear that. I think my first exposure to GTA 3 was they had a PS2 in the back room at the art school that I was taking drawing lessons at. Maybe not the best thing to bring home from drawing lessons, but what are you going to do? So now, okay, so at that point, you had Vice City in that case. I would say probably fairly near to when it came out. Now, of course, you probably weren't doing speedruns of it then. But that was something. Would you say the PS2 was like your first, like your console? Was that something that you would have maybe saved up and bought as a child of money, or is that like? Because I know you saw like your father really went out of his way to give you the PlayStation 1. Like that was like almost just sort of like, here, son.
No, I think the PlayStation was whether it was a gift, Christmas gift, a birthday gift, I can't remember, but I know for sure the PS2 was that as well. I think that was a birthday gift. The unfortunate thing, I don't know if you know this about me actually. I had a house fire when I was young, so some belongings, perhaps a good portion of them were perished. So that didn't mean that I lost a lot of the classic PS1 games. I know I played a lot of Spider-Man 2 Inter Electro. That was a fun game, really classic PSX game. And, a lot of these copies of all my copies of Spider-Man 2 are gone. But no, and so at some time I had to rebuild up that collection. It was a modest collection. But I remember we got some stuff from the American Cross, a Genesis, in fact, that came with like a little box of Genesis games that like 5 or 6 of them were NBA Jam. It was awesome.
Wow.
So that was a good way to occupy the time. But
cool. So now going forward from there. I'm wondering what's sort of the next step in your journey here. Do you remember a first exposure to speedrunning even before you tried it yourself?
So I had the MMO phase, the Toontown phase.
I do remember your MMO wife,
yeah.
So that's essential.
Hopefully my MMO wife is not listening to this. I remember that era of time, maybe early mid 2000s, maybe creeping into the late 2000s. This was when Google Video was maybe at its prime. This was before YouTube even was purchased by Google.
Right, they were separate services at all. Yeah,
a very long time ago. It's hard to remember that, but I remember just looking up gaming videos all the time. I'd look up Gary's Mod, and from Gary's Mod you drift into Half-Life, and from Half-Life you drift into maybe the very famous Spider Waffle Half-Life 1 scripted run. And that was astounding to me. I was like, you see a lot of things in speedrunning that you just did not know were possible in games, maybe at all. And that was fascinating to me. So from there, you find taskvideos.org, you find Speedrun Archives, Speedrun's Archive, sorry, which was a very prominent source at the time for
and I mean that's its heyday. It's the late 2000s. That's when everyone's still on forums.
Yeah, and this was a time when video was still very much a capital T thing that you had to like download and watch locally. It's just the internet speeds were not up to cuss, so you'd watch very blurry videos on your browser, if at all. So yeah, I've always had this sort of at the very least cursory interest, and it wasn't until a few years later that live streaming and GDQ came into play. I remember, I'm sure you saw the segment with Mike at GDQ talking about the origins of GDQ and the technical difficulties they faced in getting classic games done quick to even run, because it was a phenomenal thing at the time to just have a game feed and then also have a webcam of people playing said game. Like, this was still very a new thing, and Twitch was very new. 2011, 2012.
I was gonna say, I don't think Twitch is even a thing until I think it's mid 2012.
Yeah.
It's amazed of all the people I've interviewed so far. Just to mention kind of OverBoost history, it's really been interesting. I've already had several guests who are actually already streaming on like Justin TV. I think both Pythonicus and Peaches were actually streaming pre-Twitch, which is really incredible to me, because I think it was not something I encountered until FGC videos really brought it to my attention, like watching Evo and things like that.
Yeah.
So there were pioneers out here on Justin. It's really, really incredible.
I didn't know that even that Pythonicus was on JTV. That's hype. Like, I had checked out JTV. I watched a little before Players podcast. I remember at that time. Day 9 is what really got me on Twitch, just as a viewer, because he was doing daily StarCraft II shows, and this was big at the time, and I was really, really into StarCraft. Like, at this point in my life, I had been devoted to a number of games. My namesake, KZ, in my handle, KZ FREW, that's in reference to Kreedz, which is climbing maps in 1.6, just a little bit of 3D platforming. I've done a lot of that. 3D for first-person platforming, I should say. StarCraft II was very big for me. I quite enjoyed just refining and improving myself. And in that video game, this was kind of the rise of esports, at least in North America, in Western Europe. Was StarCraft II. That was very foundational. You had very foundational organizations like MLG kind of taking this around the country, and then you had personalities like Day 9 just really getting people into it. And I could consider Day 9 to be one of my biggest influences just as a human, because he is wonderful. He's very engaging, empathetic, and conversational. Just very good at conveying really important topics in a manner that I could digest at what was still an impressionable age, junior, senior in high school. So I think in coming to speedrunning a couple years later, if that, I took a lot of what I learned about just learning, or just attitude, or whatever, competitive mindset, improving yourself, all this very important things. I brought that from Day 9, from StarCraft into speedrunning.
Yeah, no, I think what you're talking about is exactly right, because when I think to early Twitch, I think of three things. I think of speedrunning, fighting game community, and StarCraft II esports. I think that's absolutely right to bring that up. That even me, who really wasn't that much into StarCraft II, I definitely recognize that. Folks like Day 9 and StarCraft II, I was really into it. So what now? You said you were doing Kreedz climbing, and let's be honest here, Kreedz climbing, which is time trials and these sort of platforming 1.6 maps, is already itself, I think, sort of a form of speedrunning, but it's not quite speedrunning in the way I think a lot of people think of speedrunning, which is like a whole game with maybe live split, a timer open or something like that. What's your first foray into speedrunning then?
Well, if we want to go back there, to Kreedz, which is it's a It's fair. I never thought of it.
It's in your name, so it may be worth talking about.
Yeah, I never really thought of it as speedrunning, weirdly enough, because that term wasn't really used. Like, we called them runs, like, oh, that's a good run. But, I just never really, I've already just mentally just had this weird disassociation between, like, speedrunning and that topic and that community, and separately the Kreedz community. Yeah, I really got into that thanks to, I guess you could say, just custom, like, Counter-Strike source maps, custom Counter-Strike source servers. Curious little me, how old was I? 13, 14? I don't know. Somewhere around there. Just kind of going through the server list for CSS, and I'm like, what the hell is a surf map? And this is tangentially related, solid, like, movement-based, just fun stuff in the game. So I check out surf maps, and I'm like, oh, this is what this is. This is really cool. I never really thought of playing Counter-Strike in this way, just kind of gliding around on angular surfaces. That was really cool. And so I would check out fan sites, Counter-Strike fan sites, if you would. Places like FPS Banana. That's gone by another name now, maybe Game Banana or something, but there was a lot of Counter-Strike resources, mods, skins, before all of this was monetized. And of course, maps, and they had surf maps, and they had climb maps. I'm like, what the hell is a climb map? I'd check that out. And that's really engaging me. I couldn't tell you why. I just think it's hard to say. I think if you look at like a proper climb map, like a Kreedz block map, it's a sort of look, an aesthetic, and architecture that you don't see like anywhere else in games, and I think that's really cool. It's really cool to be able to jump up something, turn around, and just look down at like all of the ground you have covered. Just be like, wow, I have ascended very, very high just by pressing the space bar. Nonetheless, there have been communities formed around just optimizing your times from A to B, top to bottom in these maps. And I got into KZ mod, the Kreedz climbing Half-Life 2 mod that is free on Steam, if you want to check that out. Because I've made content for that game. It's in the game. I have content on Steam. I'm technically a game developer. I could say that and be correct.
Put that on your CV.
I could. So, yeah, we worked for a few years on that. Some really good guys. Millet, I remember, a Finnish map developer. He made some very famous Kreedz maps. One day, just spectating me in a server, and he said, "You're really good. You should try and record some maps or record some maps. I don't know. They call it record because you would record a demo of yourself playing. So, at any rate, I was like, okay, sure. So I kind of did a few casual runs. I put them on the website, and I was like, that was fun. I'll do more of that. I'll take this a little more seriously because I just like to idly play. You just get better as you do that. And then I was like really started getting into it. I got a lot of times, got a lot of records. That community is not so much around anymore. Just in general, the source modding community, at least of the Half-Life 2 era, moved on to other things. But definitely one of the foundational pillars for me. That whole community in general, not just Kreedz climbing, but like source forts. Very, very popular ones. I remember during the era of us all waiting on Team Fortress 2, there were at least one or two Half-Life 2 mods made their own styling of Team Fortress. So it was all very fun.
No, that was definitely a very foundational area, I feel like, for a lot of first-person shooters and things like that. And that's also a community, because you're still involved with that somewhat now, right? In that I know you've done commentary for some recent events in Kreedz climbing, right?
Yeah, so the community, Extreme Jumps, is, I still chat them up sometimes, just still keep in touch, and they kind of, it's really interesting, because you clearly get to a point where maybe you don't realize it, but like there's a period of time in your life that has passed, right? And that chapter is perhaps closed. Nothing is so like binary 1 to 0 in life where it's like, okay, this is you are doing this and this is now over and now you are on to this part. It's like, obviously I'm still involved, but in a lot of ways I've moved on to do other things. I don't want to necessarily say bigger and better things, right? That's kind of the ideas you want to move forward in life, but they all kind of know about me and GDQ and Twitch and all this and my brand, and like it's never really something where it's not like I've come back home and said, hey guys, check out all of the hot shit I am doing. I don't pull up in my bins or whatever. It's just something that they, I guess, know about me now, and that's really cool. And in my last endeavor of really being engaged with this community and helping them put on this broadcast for their last tournament here, it's like there's a lot of people in the community now that I don't necessarily know. There's some old faces for sure, and that all these guys knew me. All these guys knew about the personal branding, and they were sharing around one of my GDQ VODs. They were like, "Yeah, check it out. It's Kang. That's how they know me. Is Kang. It's like, Kang, check him out. He's doing this thing. He's playing Vice City," and that's really cool to have that sort of backing, that sort of support. Even though I don't necessarily, hop on servers and play every day anymore.
Yeah, no, that's really great to see. I mean, honestly, it's always an affirming thing, even if you're not fully a part of it, or I shouldn't say fully a part of it, but even if it's not sort of like where you're maybe setting up camp on a nightly basis, to be, related or to have associations of communities that are, welcoming and affirming is really cool. It's the good part of the internet. It's when the internet works well.
Oh yeah.
So how do we get from Kreedz climbing, idly playing, improving, challenging yourself to go faster? How do we get from there to Vice City?
Well, we made the stop at StarCraft.
Right.
I'm not there for that.
We got our build order together.
Yeah, we did. We played a lot of Terran. We got Masters. And then, speedrunning, formerly me actually started to sit down and speedrun. That was a post-high school thing. Sure, I graduated in 2012. I know you probably just aged a bit hearing that.
Holy shit, I'm a ghost now. I'm a fucking ghost. There's me. Look, I just put my face in the in our call. Okay. Please continue.
So anyway, this was around the time I had found some of the early GDQs. It's not something I watched live, but we're talking about GDQ 2012, 2013, 2011 even. And it kind of gave speedrunning for me and for a lot of people this new face. I really don't think you can understate just how much GDQ has effectively created a culture out of this, but that's sort of what happened, and so I was like, this is really cool. I want to, as most people would say with speedrunning, they probably have some kind of thought to the effect of, this is really cool, I want to try it. So I tried what you might consider some random games. Dead Space I played on the PS3, and I timed with W split, and I did not record any of this because I didn't really have the capabilities. I did some Crash Team Racing, and that was when I created the KZ FREW account. Mm-hmm. I had been on Twitch before, but I just was like, okay, if I'm going to speedrun, I want to post this under another name, just kind of dump it somewhere. And so November 2013, I was doing some Crash Team Racing runs, and my first viewer, the first person to talk in my chat, was HypnoShark. Shout out to HypnoShark, who just got partnered recently, Crash Team Racing extraordinaire. He was doing it back then.
Congrats.
I know. He was doing it back then. And I've told this story a few times, but he just types in my chat and I'm mid-run, and I didn't have microphones set up. I was sort of streaming just my emulator and the timer, as you do. I didn't have a microphone or camera or anything, and he types, and I want to type back to him, so I tab out of my emulator to type in response to what he's saying, and I crash my emulator and reset my splits in the process. So I hid for many months after that in a cave out of embarrassment. And when I reemerged, I got into Vice City, actually. I spent some time lurking on the speedrun subreddit. And I feel like the scene was just so much smaller back, way smaller. But Adam 8K was very, very active at the time, 2012, 2013, before then. And it's the summer of 2014, and Vice City is about to change forever because someone you could call a lurker in speedrunning as well, Bastant2, posted a video of him buying a property in Vice City without paying money for it. And that's a huge deal because Vice City is very strict with the amount of money it gives its player. And that is a hurdle you have to navigate through in the speedrun. So the idea of being able to eliminate a huge portion of that burden, or just eliminate it altogether, is a very, very exciting thing. So I saw that thread. It was very much upvoted, as you would say, had a few hundred, and I was like, oh, this is a big deal. I like Vice City. I like Grand Theft Auto. I would not consider it, a fandom I was particularly involved with in any way. I got pretty into it. I thought San Andreas was an amazing experience. Just this very large. I've never played a video game that's maybe impressed me as much as San Andreas, because the scale, the scope of it compared to Vice City is insane. So that's something that really latched onto me when I was younger. And also Vice City, of course. Most of the games I'd played didn't have the scale of Vice City either at the time. So to also have San Andreas just kind of hit you in the face with what felt like another world entirely was something else. So
yeah, those games I think really gave you the sense of sandbox in a way that was hard to convey at the time. I think it's really, if you didn't grow up in that era of like GTA 3, Vice City, San Andreas, kind of expanding the idea of a open world that you can play in, like that really is a thing that impressed people, and I think anyone from that generation, it stuck with them. Yeah,
it was really unbelievable. It did stick with me, and that's kind of how it cemented the name Grand Theft Auto in my mind. And so I had revisited the games a little bit as an adult, played a few playthroughs, played some Grand Theft Auto 3, a game I did not encounter in my youth, as I skipped straight to Vice City and then San Andreas when I was younger. But so I was like, I saw this and I'll check it out. I had checked out Vice City runs before, and when at that time the first thing you see in a Vice City run is several rounds of a mini game to grind money, and so me evaluating this as a speedrunner at the time, I'm like, this doesn't seem too interesting. The thought of having,
and of course that's the Cone Crazy mini game that you're referring to.
Yeah, Cone Crazy. It's you have several checkpoints on a parking lot rooftop, and you go around navigating the cones, trying not to smash them. And you actually double your money every time you win. So you would just, power of 2 exponentially up to like $64,000. You'd get that rewarded, and you would go on your merry way, because at that point you have like well over 100K. But yeah, so that takes several minutes, even if you're very, very good at it, which top runner at the time, Racktrot, was pretty good. So as a runner, I was like, this is not something I really want to drift into. And of course, I revisit it later thanks to that speedrun thread post on the Reddit. And here we are. It's just,
yeah, no, we'll get into that, I think, a little bit more. But before we dive into the specific runs and really maybe talk more about Vice City, I wanted to get some takes, because I love takes. Okay. They fuel me. They nourish me.
You got my take on milk the other day.
I did. It was sour. So of all the runs you've done, maybe this is an easy one. What is your favorite game to speedrun?
No, it is. I'm sorry to bore you, but it probably is Vice City.
Yeah, I figured that was probably easy, but I need to know on the opposite end, what's the worst game that you've ever done a speedrun of?
All right. Let me just revisit my own speedrun.
I have this up already. It's great. This every time I do this.
You know, I think out of a lot of people, perhaps one of my profiles, perhaps one of the most erratic, in terms of all sorts of things. Not platform. I generally stick to PC, but I've done a bunch of what people would consider random things. Paratopic, for example, short indie horror game, coming in at just a little over 20 minutes. Right under that is Sheep Raider. That's a Looney Tunes game. Originally on the PS1. Also, for some reason, at a PC release. I do not have a very good time in that. Man, is it Croc 2?
Is it Croc 2?
Is it Croc 2?
You were gung-ho about Croc 2 for like a few weeks. I think I remember that period of time.
Yeah.
You remember that? You remember when you were gung-ho about Croc 2?
I think maybe something was in my food, and I had a parasite in my brain, just had me play Croc 2 for a bit. All the way at the bottom is a very bloody skeleton in my closet, Nicktoons Racing on the Game Boy Advance. That was world record once, but of course now I think it's owned by Abney, the absolute madman. No, who was the KT the Creeper? Oh man, this guy now has Nicktoons Racing. Anyway, to answer your question,
yes. What's the one?
It's I'm not going to say Nicktoons Racing because that was Paramount, right? That's part of my history. It might be. I'm gonna upset. Yeah, it's Jack 2 80% hover. Now the reason is not. I love the Jack boys. They love me. Outrageous Josh, Game Pro, shouts them reports. It's very funny on Twitter. I love these individuals. They're very welcoming and wholesome. They've got a great community going on there. But Jack 20% hoverless is a crappy category because it doesn't do one of the main important bits of tech, the hover. I just did not do that because I don't know. I'm a lazy degenerate. That's probably the worst one. Croc 2. There's some real depth there, I would say. So it's not that one. Thematically, it's easy to pick that one apart. But no, that's fine. Sheep Raider. That's also fine. That might be like the second. Paratopic is important. And that's important. We can't say no. That's foundational to Fastbad, I would say. Paratopic.
Yeah, that might be. That really just sort of petty rivalries.
We need to respect the history. Yeah.
Truly, nothing drives down the record time for a speedrun quite like a petty rivalry over truly insane gameplay mechanics.
It's awesome. we need to respect Paratopic.
All right, so let's move over to Vice City now. Now, in prepping for this, I did rewatch two specific VODs. I think one of them a lot of people are probably familiar with, and that is the AGDQ 2019 Vice City any percent no SSU VOD, and then also I watched the Vice City all missions from Shots Fired Resurrection, which would have taken place this past November. And I think the first thing I'm kind of interested in is I want to talk a little bit about. I want you maybe to give for the listener because you already mentioned it, I think, which was the mechanic that allows you to purchase assets without having the money for them is the use of this PC-only feature called a replay. And that's one of the useful parts of a replay. But there's really a ton of things that are done with replays. Can you maybe give us an intro into what a replay is and why it breaks the game so hard?
So replays, where do we start? there's
well, tell us what a replay is supposed to be.
Okay,
maybe.
so in the PC, as PMC has mentioned, PC edition of Vice City, of GTA 3, of San Andreas, you have this function of the game that is not really well advertised. It might be mentioned in the readme.txt of these games, where they kind of threw it in as a little bonus, a little funsy bit where you can just, something crazy happens in the game, you can watch it back. You can press the F1 key and you can get a good solid up to 30 seconds really of what has immediately just happened. So you can save this to a file if you press F2. It actually saves a file on your hard drive in one of the game's directories. And you can watch that back at any time by pressing the F3 button. So you can manipulate your replay to just be very little short bursts of speedrun critical things, like standing over an in-game icon, because you can access these by proxy just through the replay. That's not an intended part of the replay, likely. I would pretty much guarantee that's not intended. But it's something that they either didn't know about or just kind of left in because the use case of that is so super specific. Like the amount of people that are going to use replays, compared to the people that are just going to play the game, perhaps never know about it, let alone the people who are going to play the game, know about the replay feature, and then inadvertently have a replay where they walk over something and it triggers. I don't know how they specifically designed this feature. I just know that it is essential to the lifeblood of Vice City. You can do all sorts of things. You can interact with all sorts of in-game objects. You can interact with rampage icons and sort of trigger things inadvertently. You can get movement in cutscenes by playing a close replay, as it's known, picking up a close icon on a replay and just playing that at your will.
Yeah, I mean, so anytime you see those pink icons, I think you already mentioned two of them. Really, in effect, we mentioned three, because we mentioned close, we mentioned the rampage, the property buy, and then also things that you pick up in missions. The rifle on Guardian Angels, save icons, briefcase on Juju Scramble, for example. We're talking about all missions. One thing so those things, it's a pretty common thing in speedrunning that if you somehow start a cutscene, the game will place you, or it wants to place you, at the end of the cutscene. So like that, for example, is one way that the replay system is used to accomplish warps, because the game is going to assume, well, if you went into the icon to start the cutscene during Guardian Angels, we're going to place you after that cutscene where we think you should be. But of course, you weren't anywhere near there. You just happened to have a replay that walked over that icon that teleported you. And I was really impressed. I made notes on all the different use cases of close replays, because close replays in particular, the utility of these is truly astounding.
It's so good.
I want to see. So I cited 4 different uses for close replays in my notes. I'm curious, what if I had to say, give me 4 uses for close replays, what would you say?
Let's see. Movement in cutscenes, speed up fades, cancel the knockdown animation.
You're already doing better than me. I didn't even write those 2. Fade skips.
Put out fires is another one.
That's one of the ones I
good.
put down.
Good. Let's see if I missed any more. Oh, obviously, wanted level at or below 2.
And then there's one other one that even me, obviously, I never did fade skip or skipping knockdown animation. But this last use for close replays is something that I, PMC, would have done in runs.
Is it Flintstones modded vehicles? Or no, it's it's breaking the auto scroller.
Yep, that's exactly it. The fire rate. So the close replays again are a replay where the close store in the replay, you're picking up the close icon and just replaying this. allows you to gain control of your character during cutscenes, allows you to get rid of wanted stars, to skip all sorts of things, to unlock your fire rate during the rail shooting sequences. It's really amazing. Another concept for this speedrun that I wanted to dive in on, we kind of touch on it here in terms of the cutscene control thing, but I also think this ties into another use of the replay, which is the typically what's done with the Rampage replays, which is to abuse the on-mission flag. Do you want to talk a little bit about like on-mission flag abuse?
So, Vice City, the way it is structured, you are either on a mission or you're not on a mission. Sometimes I call this free roam mode. Known quote unquote professionally amongst people in GTA speedrunning as on mission 1 or on mission 0, because it is a flag, true or false. So this is independent of mission scripts, which actually kind of controls, I don't want to say the gameplay, but it spawns all the mission objects, it spawns all the mission enemies, it has the mission structure where you go here, you do this, you do that sort of thing. That is all independent of on mission 1 or on mission 0. So the distinction there is important, because normally at any given time, if you activate a mission script, it's also going to put you into on mission 1. Now, you can, through replays, align it so that two things happen at once that both trigger on mission 1. In this case, rampages trigger on mission 1. So a good way to sort of break out of this intended state is submission starting a rampage. Now that's when you get into an emergency vehicle, for example, an ambulance, a fire truck, a police car, you have access to a little mini game. You can trigger it just by pressing a button. You just press a button and boom, like text on your screen appears, says firefighter, and you get like a little fire to put out, that sort of thing. You could cancel this at will at any time. So the idea here is you make a replay of a rampage icon, yourself just kind of standing over that. You go find an emergency vehicle, typically a cop car or an ambulance. And then you activate the submission while watching back the replay of the rampage icon. These two things will happen at once. Boom, boom. And you've got two missions activated. And you're on mission 1. Now you can then just cancel your emergency vehicle mission. And when that is canceled, the game is like, okay, he's ending the mission. He's no longer doing the firefighter. He's no longer doing the ambulance. He's no longer doing the vigilante and the cop car. So it's on mission 0. But now you still have the rampage going. So in this way, rampages are tied to a 2-minute timer, generally. So at the end of the 2-minute timer, the rampage expires. If you've not completed the objective of killing X amount of people, you've technically failed it. And then that's when you would go back to on mission 0. So at this juncture, you can, with what's known as an on mission 0 rampage, since you were on the rampage on mission 0, you could start a mission, storyline mission, and then rampage runs out, and now you're still on the storyline mission, but you're on mission 0. And this can get really interesting because you're obviously in a game state that was never intended. So you push the boundaries a bit, you explore this. Turns out, you can do a various number of things. You can generally, most of the time, crash the game.
Yeah, that's the usual outcome.
That's usually what happens. You could start the exact same mission twice. A lot of times, this is a process known as duping. So, what happens when you start certain missions twice? Well, some interesting things happen. For example, if you start Jury Fury twice, you have then caused this incidental act of sort of passing it almost immediately, because you have objects in this mission that you're supposed to damage. You spawn 2 sets of them. They've spawned on top of each other. They damage each other. And then the mission is complete. So that is one tactic used in the speedrun, a tech, a strat, whatever you want to term it. That is something used in the speedrun. Alternatively, you dupe loose ends. For example, you kill a certain set of guys, you get in a helicopter, you chill outside the ice cream factory, you pause and unpause a bunch, and you have delivered 3 vehicles at Sunshine Autos. There you go. That's sort of how insane it can get here. And it's just really great. I think this adds plenty to the speedrun. It's certainly extremely nuanced contextual knowledge that I'm kind of trying to impart in the most general way. It's a task I have tried to refine over the years here.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, it's definitely the sort of stuff that can be hard to convey. I think it's one of the reasons that for the purposes of this interview, I've tried to sort of convey it in the idea of looking at the tools, and maybe some example missions, because certainly I think when you get to what you're talking about when it comes to the way that like being on a mission but being able to start another mission will cause the script to advance is it's unpredictable and certainly has a lot of weird effects. So we've already kind of talked a little bit about 90% no SSU, and I think some of the stuff that we've discussed really applies to that. Jury Fury, for example. The thing that you were just talking about with mission scripts, the sort of the secret sauce of why 90% no SSU is so short is because of this mission script advancing, which gives us the cherry poppers insta pass. Do you want to just go mention that real quick?
So I will say, what I recited earlier was actually a hundo strat. It wasn't necessarily insta pass. I'm sorry if it caused any confusion, but yes, insta passing is huge tech that sounds made up in a number of ways. Now, the one that is people are going to be most frequently encountering as whether a spectator or runner of any person OSSU is when you get in the ice cream van and you've suddenly completed the ice cream van mission. How does that happen? Well, it's more of this on mission abuse where you start Hit the Courier, a Printworks mission, a required storyline mission. And then, in some, however you want, you break out of on mission 1, so you can have that mission going while in free roam mode. At any point during this mission, if you get in the ice cream van outside of the ice cream factory asset, that triggers its own mission, Distribution. Now, when you complete this mission, Distribution, it gives you the property. You've completed the property. You've completed an objective in the game. And you need to do a number of these in order to unlock the third act, the final, the penultimate, and then the final mission. You need to have a number of assets, quote unquote. So Ice Cream Factory is one of them. I mentioned Printworks. That's another one. So if you're on Hit the Courier, you get in the ice cream van on mission 0. You've started Distribution. Now, you're not supposed to start 2 missions on top of each other like that. And what happens is it takes the second mission starts with the offset, if you want to, that's technically the term, within the script of the first one. So the script will start at position, say, 500 instead of position 0, where it normally does. And incidentally, the code, the instructions located at position 500 in the script give you a +1 to your asset counter, but it does not complete the mission, actually. So you still have access to this mission, and therein lies the secret sauce, as he's mentioned, where you can just do this again. You get another asset. You can do it again. You get another one. You do it again. You get another one. And so very quickly you see that you can just farm these up to finish the game.
Yeah, no, it's really incredible how it works, and that is really, I think you explained pretty well the the essential ingredient for really getting past that phase of the. If anyone's played the game casually, you'll know that you have to spend a while just building up your criminal empire and getting all these assets, and doing the missions to make the assets generate cash, and that's really really for the most part skipped, of course, in the any percent no SSU speedrun. But let's talk about a run that I know you are a big advocate for, and also you've been pretty involved in. And I certainly think you've. I don't know how much you're responsible for tech in any percent no SSU, but I know that you have had a hand in routing for all missions. Do you want to talk about what made you get into Vice City all missions, and then maybe just talk about some of your contributions there?
Right. So during the early days of GTA speedrunning, really a thing that took form in 2013. Certainly, it took form earlier. I think the first. There were segmented runs. This was around the time, many years ago, when like a 2-hour run was considered too long to just sit down and do. Clearly, this is something that has changed, right? So, any percent no SSU at the time was known as just straight up any percent, because we didn't know about the unholy ways you can destroy the game and just skip right to the end. But when things started to get real, I would say, when this stopped being necessarily a speed run where you just grind money and kind of hop, skip, and jump to the end after an hour and a half of doing very intended things. Instead, it turns out, we can bypass some of this. This is getting really interesting. We can break down the game in various ways, play it in ways that was not intended. When that all started to unfold, most of the attention, of course, was on just any percent. Just, well, how fast can we just straight up beat the game? And that's where all the excitement and focus was. Now, it was a time when I would say the art of running this game was not so refined. So you had a lot more outdated runs in categories like all mission, in categories like 100%, where things are advancing very, very quickly over at any percent, but in all missions, it's not taking form as fast because there's just more shit to do there. And it doesn't make sense in the whirlwind of progress to really try and route something out when all of that effort could go to waste tomorrow with some other optimization. So when the dust settled, I was one of the folks that went back, kind of garnered some ideas from people like Powdernet and other top runners at the time, where it's like, oh, what if we, for example, took phone calls on this mission, and we that was an idea. We didn't have a way to get there. We didn't have a way for that to unfold in the run. So I developed the tactic of having a rampage expire on all hands on deck by starting a rampage with autoside and then playing it again on autoside, and then that expires and all hands on deck. That's extremely ancient stuff. That is not how it is done in any way, shape, or form now, and it's actually god awful to even think about doing it that way because of just how antiquated that is. We've certainly found more ways to kind of, stretch the game a bit at its ends. Maybe not snapping it entirely in half, but certainly ways that things are much faster now. This was a time before Instapasses really got real. I don't even know when Instapasses first took form. I think it might have been 2015. But yeah, so that was probably the biggest routing project I've done, was sit down and string together Vice City all missions. And I think that's a really unique thing, because Grand Theft Auto speedrunning can be extremely freeform compared to other games, I think, especially Vice City, because Vice City is literally at some point non-linear. You get halfway through the game, you now have the criminal empire. As PMC mentioned, you build that up. And the game just kind of nudges you in that direction and then just leaves you alone. So as speedrunners, that's really interesting. That's a really unique environment, I think. There are some obvious things where it's like, oh, mission A is here, mission B is right next to it. That's obvious. Like that leap is totally fine. But what about when you're dumped in the middle of the ocean after all hands on deck? What do you do? What is fast? You know, that sort of thing. What phone calls do you have at that point in the game? Because phone calls progress story unlock missions. And the way those are unlocked isn't not always necessarily clear. It's not always necessarily linear. There's a lot of different ways this run can take form. So that's something I sit down and did, and I routed it, and something I eventually had the top time in with my route, and it was cool to see other people put that to use as well. Nowadays, a lot of that route is obviously super, super outdated, but some of that remains. Speed running routes can come sort of this like patchwork Frankenstein thing where it's like you just collaborate and years and years and years pass and you just have here's the work of many, many people. Even though you might slap one or two names together on the front and say this route was done by so or so, it's still using ideas from many, many people, even people that we perhaps have forgotten the name of. I don't know who the name of the viewer that told Josh to get on the train in Snail Trail. I don't know that person's name. They changed that mission forever.
That's a phenomenal change. Good grief.
It's very, very good. So I think it's GTA and Vice City and my history of law missions is especially unique in that sense.
No, I think it's a really good point about speedrun routes too, is that, people often talk about how it's collaborative, but there is the issue of how time and the fact that a new runner will come in and maybe, if you're lucky, there is a tutorial specifically meant to teach, but oftentimes you're just working from a VOD and you don't even know. Certainly, and of course, that's even true across language barriers. I recently had the experience of learning from Japanese VODs. So I don't even know names. I watched this person's video. I don't know who it is. But they seemed like they did a good job. I wanted to ask, at what point in all missions did the state of the game become so corrupted that towards the end of the run, light posts just fall over for no reason?
So in some ways, that is a misconception. In some ways.
Please correct me then.
That effect where light posts just fall over is specifically a result of, I'm going to upset somebody who knows more than this. That is a result, I believe, of starting the mission Bombs Away twice. Bombs Away do. I believe that's what it is. Perhaps you remember the days even before the Japanese version of the game. I think you were around that time, maybe lurking in the shadows.
I've been lurking in speedrun streams since 2012, but it took me like 4 years to speak up.
Hey.
Sorry.
I'm not here demanding an apology for that, but before the Japanese version became a thing, and that became a thing because offsets agreed more, let's say, in that version. But in the international version, the Steam version, the retail version, the methodology of farming assets and getting that counter up was different. You'd start hit the courier 5 times, and then you would have that mission running 5 times on top of one another. And the one of the effects of that was something known as disco lights, where the street lamps, and I have no idea why or how, but they would change color. Like the light they're casting would just be would be disco lights. It'd go from like white to blue to red to yellow to green. I don't know how. I've never seen that effect anywhere else in the game. That's just a thing that would happen at that state because of how corrupt it is. And the lampposts would, of course, fall over. But PMC is speaking to just sort of the insanity about Vice City and how it can unfold. This conversation we're talking a lot about, like I said, really nuanced, specific things. You hear this conversation and you don't know anything about the game. You wouldn't even think it's about Grand Theft Auto because it just doesn't sound like your intended Grand Theft Auto experience. And I think that's a great thing when the game can sort of just become its own game, thanks to speedrunning and the various ways you can interact with the game as a result of just how deep you can go down that rabbit hole. Certainly, there's a lot more games that are a lot more surface level. And in some ways, I liken Vice City sort of to Ocarina of Time in this way. That's a very visible, popular game that, when broken down, often looks nothing like what one would usually experience. Vice City can be a lot like that. And it doesn't feel like it's always a part of that conversation. And that's why I'm sort of, as PMC describes, a big advocate for something like all missions. You know, I would love to bring all missions to GDQ for the first time in 6-ish years, because, oh my God, it's totally different. And if people think 80% no SSU is insane, they're going to lose their minds during some of these all missions tricks.
Do you want me to tell you the answer to when the last time all missions was at GDQ?
I think it was, I'm going to guess, SGQ 2013.
Pretty close. AGDQ 2014, of course, it was at mecha.
Yeah. No.
And a time of 3 hours, 3 minutes, and 23 seconds.
That's
for 6 years ago. That actually sounds pretty reasonable.
That was before replay tech. So yeah,
right.
No,
I was gonna say I don't have any problem with this actually.
Yeah, no, even, it's entirely before the game changed in any regard. It was still, I would say, that innocent period of we really didn't know what we were onto yet. I say I wasn't a part of this yet, but it's fun to think about, knowing what we know now.
All right, so Vice City owns, and clearly it's a top tier speed game with a big skill ceiling and lots of tech and lots of history. If you want to see more history, I do recommend looking up English Ben's A History of Vice City Any Percent video. We've been referring to it as Any Percent No SSU, but up until when the SSU exploit was discovered for warping to the end of the game, it really was just Any Percent. So a lot of what FREW's been talking about was for a long time just Any Percent. Before the SSU exploit came up, and you had a hand in that as well. But again, you can watch English Ben's video on the Vice City Any Percent world record progression, and that'll get you everything you need to know about that. I want to talk about a different kind of experience. I want to talk about what led you to speedrun Miami Vice, the 2004 video game released only in PAL regions.
Yeah, this was an era, right? So, I've been playing GTA for many years. Of course, I have no issues with obviously that. But so sometimes you become disenfranchised with something, and you kind of drift into other lanes, just kind of see what's out there, right? You get tired of pizza, you want to try sushi. I don't know. Vice City, though, I do want to say I will go to war against anybody that says anything otherwise. One of the hardest speed games of all time, and I will die for that cause. But we've kind of drifted around in speedrunning. Speedrunning is a community that has every game ever, and that's a good and bad thing. But certainly that includes what I drifted into, the sort of these 3D, how do you call it? GTA clones? I don't know. So True Crime New York City is really a game that set off the idea of how bad can it get, but also how good of a speedrun can it be. And so I had been looking alongside others, PMC included, for diamonds, right? Digging through the dirt. And Moby Games is a wonderful search engine for all things irrational and undiscovered. So I came across a game I'd never heard of, Miami Vice, which is aesthetically very, very similar to Vice City. Of course, there's a lot of influence there. Vice City is a game influenced a lot by culture of the 80s. Miami Vice, Scarface, these very big 80s icons. So if there was a Miami Vice video game, I feel like I would have known about it. because I for sure know about the Scarface game. Still not played that one. But I've not seen a single episode of Miami Vice, nor have I really known of any games released with this licensing. So I was really interested. No one had ever mentioned this. So I checked it out. I played it. It is not very good. It's a very, very simple game. It's a game published by Davilex and developed by Atomic Planet Entertainment, if anybody knows those names. Davilex, a company perhaps known for products that have a certain reputation. I don't know. Trying to be gentle.
I mean, I would say there was an era of budget game publishing, and I think there was a shop that would get licenses and make licensed games at an affordable price. Yeah,
for sure. And Miami Vice, certainly one of those games. It's very simple, gameplay wise. The levels are very small. The cutscenes are probably voiced by the developers. The animations are certainly very, very stiff. There's a lot of meme factor here, and it was a game that I streamed in its entirety on my channel, and it was fairly popular. People were into it and laughing. And as a speedrunner, I was inclined to just try and break it as much as I could, and it was difficult. I couldn't. The game was very simple, and as I've discussed with my friend PMC before, a game is going to need features for those features to be broken. A problem I still encounter in one specific game and others, but in Miami Vice, I just cannot find a way to really adequately sequence break it to my liking until a door. I just phased through it. It was astoundingly easy. And that sort of snowballed, and there was a huge whirlwind of people. I say huge. I mean, barely a dozen, but enough people, right? Like to have this go off, sort of with a game that no one had really ever heard of before, was excellent. And we collectively as a community destroyed it. We ruined that game. Really?
We chewed that up so quick. Oh my god!
It was glorious. It felt like someone found something new every 10 minutes. You know, it's a game that went from having a speed run time of 40-ish, 45, 47 minutes maybe, kind of fairly playing it straight, pretty much just playing it out as you would. That went down to under 10 minutes. Very, very quickly, around the 10 to 12 minute mark, very quickly at least. And then from there, Jorpy, in his Godspeed to him, just grinding out that sub 10.
Truly a legend. To grind out, I couldn't even believe that. I think I had done like a handful of attempts and got like a 12-minute time and said goodbye. But no, I mean, and I think what's incredible about it too is that what ultimately ended up happening was that the door clip that you found for that first area, which really truly cut a level to almost nothing, eventually it was discovered that basically like every other door in the game, especially if you put your frame rate up to like, 240 or something,
right? Every
other door in the game could have the same thing done to it.
Yeah, it was really astoundingly easy. It's kind of crazy that I even found that, because I was very intent on playing with like maybe 30 at least 60 FPS, something like that, because the game did not just limit your frame rate, and then you play it on hardware that is advanced 16 years, and it's going to get a little out of control. The frame rate was so high I couldn't really properly move when starting the game, which it was a real bitch to get running. And I think that is a huge hampering in the potential it had, but it's really not something I'm necessarily out here demanding people play. It's no Vice City. It's not even a true crime New York City. But yeah, it was awesome. It was cool to just watch that unfold in real time. It's a real love letter sort of to speedrunning when that sort of thing happens, honestly. Just everybody coming together, breaking shit.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to the process of, always be on the lookout for new games to speedrun. And also, as you learn more about how to exploit video games, keep that in mind for each new thing you do. The one other bit of tech I wanted to highlight from Miami Vice is how the game ends. Do you remember who found the final boss, Skip?
That was it Kabali? I think it was. I think so.
Yeah, do you want to explain the whole situation? Because the casual play, as I think you said, is pretty straightforward and pretty reasonable, except for this final level.
Yeah, the final boss was a real pain. He has a very powerful gun, and he's very accurate with it. So you have to be very meticulous in how you navigate the level. It's the game ends on a rooftop, and you kind of go around the stage in a painstaking counterclockwise fashion, effectively ending back where you started. And so I sort of developed a very consistent way to get around the stage. And it took some time, because not only was there this boss character, there was a lot of dudes in addition on the rooftop also trying to end your life. One of them with a grenade launcher. At some point, I thought, okay, there's got to be another way to do this, because kind of chasing the boss around the stage is very dangerous, even with all of the setups I had found, where it's like, stand here, you got a good angle on him, this blocks you from a lot of line of fire from others, that sort of thing. So I realized he would advance around the stage when he takes certain damage. He doesn't always take damage, was kind of inconsistent, but you could snipe him kind of from afar with locking on and using your M4 or whatever, and he would advance around the stage. And then you could get to certain advantage points where you could see him, you could snipe him, he'd move around. So at some point, he gets to an area that's kind of hard to reach him. So instead of going around the stage as intended, which spawns a lot of dudes, including the grenade launcher dude, I was like, let's just go backwards. Can you just go backwards? You can go backwards, actually. So, so here we are. I spent a lot of time on this last stage just trying to make it consistent, because it was by far the longest and most difficult part of the run. Eventually, I find, okay, we can kind of do this backwards. We can kind of break out of the intended route a little bit. Nothing finicky, nothing weird, no clips or anything, just kind of going in places on the stage that are not used in intended ways or even ways at all. There's a lot of empty space in that level. But anyway, I got it pretty consistently. And it was fast. It was like 2 minutes faster than perhaps going the intended way was doing, the backwards way. And then Kabali comes along, and he has a faster way. And it's kind of the real punchline to Vice City. It's really, when you contextualize it, it's incredible. I boot up the video that Kabali sent to the Discord, the Miami Vice speedrunning Discord, and just want to paint the scene for you.
Please.
It's it's kind of a muddy looking rooftop. All right, the color palette is not too tasteful or vibrant. The skyline is very pixelated because the graphic they're using doesn't have a lot of resolution. And of course, if you get up to the edges of the roof, you can see very far beneath the level, and most of it is black void going down. So there's no music, and there's just the sound of what's the name of the character, man?
Crockett.
There's just the sound of Crockett's footsteps, and it's not a very good sound. It's kind of like dress shoes on tile sound. Tick tack, tick tack, tick tack. So he starts up the video. He runs backwards away from the boss. Tick tack, tick tack, tick tack into this corner. Kind of vibrates through the corner, falls into the void, and the level complete screen comes up in just dead silence. And I think
Juan unlocked.
and it says Juan unlocked on it. Juan being the final boss. Congratulations, you've unlocked his art in the character viewer, whatever model viewer that is included in the game for some reason. At any rate, I really think that is just a great way to contextualize Miami Vice speedrunning, is silent falling through the void to bypass everything that made the level interesting.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, that's really I'm so glad that run ends that way too, because otherwise it really is just mostly door clipping. There's one or two clips that are arguably a little more set up, like the ghost ship clip, but for the most part, it really is just that. But it's a beautiful little 10-minute speed run. As I said, the run that I studied, in preparation, I had run the game myself, but was the Shots Fired Resurrection, which was the marathon debut, and might be the only marathon appearance. Unless GDQ is really thirsting for Miami Vice. Which I do believe you have submitted it for SGDQ 2020.
I did submit it. But I also timed the amount of cutscenes that you skip in that run. Not all the cutscenes you encounter in the entire game, but just in the route. And it's like 11 minutes. So I submitted that as a little goofy incentive, maybe for awful block if they would like. But yeah, one thing I want to touch on real quick, the strat of falling into the void on the final boss level, for some reason, obviously completes the game. I think something to do with maybe despawning them, whatever. But it takes about 10 seconds. So, 5 minutes to 3 minutes to 10 seconds. Just falling through the void victory. It's wonderful.
Yeah, the door clips and clips like that really do skewer the game. I mean, there's one level where we spawn in front of a door and we're supposed to go into a building and do stuff, but you can just clip through the door behind you and that ends the level immediately. Which is great
because that mission starts with a cutscene of your partner driving you up wildly to the building, and it's just like really scared. It's this hot red, whatever. It's hot red car. And then it cuts to the level, and you just turn around and leave, and the same thing happens. He just drives up to pick you up and storm off wildly into the sunset. It's excellent.
Yeah, I just forgot my lunch at home.
Yep.
Didn't pack a lunch for the day.
Really in a panic to get out of there. It's awesome.
All right, let's start wrapping things up. So we got a few things to finish off here. This is a podcast interview series, and what that means is that I like to add a little connective tissue. Now, previously, the first 5 of these interviews were done specifically under the guise of mecha speedrunning. Now, with this one, I'm sort of broadening, moving out into other pastures. So, what that means is that I have a question from my previous guest for you.
Oh,
and I'm going to get from you a question on any speedrun related thing for my next guest, who you don't know who that's going to be. I don't know who that's going to be.
All right. Okay.
So the question for you is, what if you could get a modern crossover of Armored Core and something, what would something be?
Yeah. You see, I don't have terribly much investment in Armored Core. I think it is. Most of my exposure, if not all of it, has been through watching your stream PMC and watching your speedruns, and I think it's great. I think it's very visually engaging. You've touched on it a bit. The out of bounds clip stuff has been very fun to watch, and it's a series I've personally not played, but I think it is a really cool sort of simulator. So if I could get a modern crossover of Armored Core and something else, I'm half tempted to make something that is your worst nightmare, because I know you would probably jump right on it with the Armored Core branding and then probably immediately hop off of it. Well, let's see.
Right. I mean, there's an obvious answer here, and it's the one I don't want.
Oh, it's something like Dark Souls. I mean,
right?
Yeah. Whatever. That's the obvious boring answer. I don't know. How about Armored Core and Full House? I'd like to see John Stamos sort of play this Commander Shepard-esque role in the dystopian future of 2020.
But also have to be, to raise young children as well.
Have to be a positive influence on the youth. Exactly. Yeah.
No, that's extremely fair. On that note, going forward into the future, are there any upcoming games or series that you are excited about for the future that you're thinking like, oh man, like, obviously Vice City is, my number one, but in the future, I really am excited for this thing that's coming out.
Media I am looking forward to. Man, what am I looking forward to? I gotta be honest, I've not been terribly interested in the future of Grand Theft Auto. It's a topic we brush up on a lot in my stream as I play a lot of Grand Theft Auto. You get a lot of Rockstar Games enthusiasts. You get a lot of people speculating on their grand vision of what is to come in GTA 6. And it's certainly a game I will play when it comes out. But I think, moving forward with games as a service, it kind of becomes hard for speedrunners who are interested in these perhaps isolated single player, just very, very obvious experiences where the lines are drawn and you can play around within that. I think that's going to become difficult for us to really be engaged with moving forward. And it's something that, I'm kind of turned off to. Certainly, I will still play it. I will still probably very much enjoy it. I played Red Dead Redemption 2, and that was great. But, man, media that is coming out. What is coming out? What would you answer, PMC? While I think of my own.
I think what I'd answer right now, I think the number one thing that I'm still excited about, just being a mech fan and a JRPG fan, is the kind of ongoing project of the Trails series. Like, I know I just finished Trails of Cold Steel 3, so that's a big one for me. I also think the other thing is that you mentioned I'm a big person on Armored Core, and even though FromSoft isn't meeting that demand, there's a lot of indie games in that space that are really building up, in the next few years. So it's interesting. I think the rise of indie gaming for PlayStation 1 type era looking stuff, I think that's a big thing. It's big in horror right now, but I think it's getting to other genres, in particular the MechWarrior Armored Core style games. And so I'm excited about that. I think that's a lot of the stuff that I pay the most attention to in terms of new games is that indie space stuff, and then also some of these ongoing series that I'm really into.
Yeah, I think this is all well and good. Honestly, my answers, I've come up with a couple. It might surprise you. Honestly, I don't. A lot of people are jonesing about like Cyberpunk.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I do think Death Stranding will be good on the PC. I think that would be better. PS. Generally, I don't know. I find myself annoyed with limitations of at least the current generation console, with at least the hardware, the FPS, the resolution, this sort of thing. So Death Stranding on the PC will be an experience that unlocks it, right? Crusader Kings 3, I am looking forward to. I'm always excited about the next Paradox game. I've played not a lot of Stellaris DK2, but I did play some Hearts of Iron 4 back in the day with a buddy of mine in high school, and that was a good time. So looking forward to some Crusader Kings 3. And there's rumors going around about maybe a Bloodborne, even a Demon Souls PC release. I would be extremely interested in both of those. I've played all the Souls games except Demon Souls, and truly a grating experience at times. But I think one that is really engaging, and one that you will probably never find interesting yourself, and that is all well and good. But yeah, I think American Truck Simulator DLC. Idaho is coming.
All right, time to move on. But I think that is actually literally on that note. I'm like, nope, time to wrap up. We're killing this.
Perfect.
Please, sir, where should people find you? What is the content that people should be looking for?
Let's see. I'm on Twitch most days. Twitch.tv/KZ FREW. Please follow me on Twitter. Twitter.com/KZ FREW. I have a Twitter feed. It's very good. No, I promise you. Actually, I am probably one of the funniest people on the internet. So check that out. I'm on YouTube. Sometimes twice every 3 months I post there. There's been some good content. I did a video with PMC about his beloved speed game, Die Hard Nakatomi Plaza. I think at what point did you want to get a question out of the connective tissue, as you mentioned?
Oh, shoot. I almost forgot about that.
Saving you.
God damn it. Yeah, okay. Where's your question, Buster?
Let's see. My question. If you could combine 2 video game consoles, what would it be? Because I would probably take the Game & Watch and the Virtual Play, mash that together, and just end up
create the greatest commercial flop of all time.
You imagine putting your head on that headset and just seeing Game & Watch in all his red glory. Very good.
All right. So I need you to help me end the interview.
Okay.
And the way I need you to do that is I'm gonna say like we got to get out of here. But the name of the podcast is OverBoost. So I need you to do your best like rocket booster jet engine noise to end the interview. Are you ready?
I have my girlfriend Broseph next to me. I'm gonna make some noise, okay? All right. I don't even know if she heard me. It's fine. All right. I'm ready.
All right, we need to boost out of here.